Well, hello, EXED 520 summer students. This is your instructor, Dr. Ray Rodriguez, and I'm going to guide you through this graphic that you see in the background because it's an overview for what you're going to see in this course over the next 6 weeks. So, what is differentiation? Differentiation is a way of developing different instructional strategies, methods, techniques that allow all students in a classroom to show growth over time. These are not only students with disabilities, but students that might be gifted, ELL students, basically any student. And it's taking into consideration the diversity of all students when preparing lesson plans and delivering instruction. So in this course, you're going to have 6 modules. Module 1 has got to do with the what and the why of differentiated instruction. And that has to do with, first of all, what do you base differentiation on? The who of differentiation, and that's got to do with students' interests, their readiness level, their learning profiles, and other factors that might come into play, such as their cultural background. But the primary 3 areas that we will be looking at as far as student characteristics are concerned are those 3 areas. The second aspect of the what and the who are the belief systems that teachers must have in order to implement differentiation effectively. Certain beliefs are conducive to effective differentiation, and certain beliefs about instruction are a barrier to differentiation, and we'll talk more about those. And then finally, the what of differentiation has got to do with differentiating the content of what is taught, the process, the how it is taught, and the product, how the student expresses what they've learned, and the mastery of content. And that can be done in a variety of ways. Module 2 has got to do with grouping, which is a very important component of differentiation. And we'll talk about whether or not it's heterogeneous or homogeneous. Heterogeneous meaning when you mix students together that have different readiness levels, different interests, and different learning profiles. And there are certain conditions under which that's advisable. And then homogeneous grouping, which is when all students in a group have the same readiness levels, interests, or learning profiles. Under flexible grouping, and the whole principle of that is that grouping is not static. Groups change over time. They might change even from week to week. Readiness changes over time. Interests change over time. And even learning profiles might change. So the principle of flexible grouping is that these groups are not static and they change over time. Students move from one group to another. The third aspect of grouping is how to manage it, how to manage that in the classroom. So there's certain techniques that we'll talk about to facilitate how to move students from a group, from one group to another, or from a larger classroom situation to breaking up into small groups. Then we have modules 3 and 4 that have to do with specific techniques for differentiation. And there are a variety of different mixed methods that we can talk about using, and we will. And then there's this whole area of universal design for learning and how technology can be used to differentiate for students, particularly students with disabilities. And then we'll have some more strategies for specific categories of disabilities. For example, what are some of the techniques that seem to work best for students with learning disabilities? And we'll talk about some research and strategies on that topic. And we'll also talk about strategies for differentiating for students with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, students with intellectual disabilities, and students with emotional behavioral disorders. That's modules 3 and 4. And then module 5 will talk about how to assess and grade in a differentiated classroom, and also how to provide feedback so that students can master the content more effectively. We'll talk a lot about the difference between pre-assessments, which are done before a unit is started or before a lesson is started. We'll talk about formative assessments, which are generally assessments that are not graded, but that are used to inform instruction and modify your instructional methods. And then there are summative assessments, which are those that students take to demonstrate mastery of the content that you've taught. And then we'll get into fairness issues having to do with grading. There's a lot of discussion on this topic in differentiation circles, whether or not it's fair or not to have students do different things in the classroom and still grade everybody fairly. And then the last week, Module 6, is where we won't introduce necessarily any new content, but you'll take that last week to prepare your differentiated lesson plan, and you will also take a final exam on June 27th.